the posters have Mark Watney's face, 3 words: bring him home. That's a story about seeking the lost, which starts to drift into arguably Jesus' most popular parable
of like, what's if one human life is worth billions when they're stranded on Mars, how come one human life isn't worth billions here?
You are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
Welcome, movie lovers and theology nerds, to Popcorn Theology, where we examine films for where they align with the greatest story and our greatest storyteller, discussing what to receive, reject, and redeem for common ground, fruitful conversation, and mindful movie consumption. I'm Eric.
And I'm Miles.
And we are looking at The Martian from 2015, and it was chosen by our Patron Saints. We are going back through 10 years of Popcorn Theology, going back through and catching all of the great films from 2015. Back to the beginning, yep. So, The Martian is directed by Ridley Scott, starring pretty much Matt Damon. And then the crew, so you've got the crew that Matt Damon's with, which is Jessica Chastain, Kate Mara, Sebastian Stan, Michael Pena, Axel Henny, and I think Beth Johansson was also on the ship. But I could have been wrong about that. There was a couple.
Beth Johansson is the name of the character
of Kate Mara's character.
Yeah, of their crew. But it's interesting. You and I were talking off screen just before this. That The Martian, it seems like this lone movie, like it's starring only Matt Damon. But it's actually, when you look at it, it's got a pretty large cast.
It's a very stacked cast.
Yeah. And a lot of, what do you say? You were saying Marvel people, too. A lot of Marvel
people. And apparently a lot of Lord of the Rings people, too.
Yeah. So we've only covered the people who were in space.
Yes. And then the people back on Earth was Jeff Daniels, Kristen Wiig playing a non-comedic character.
Yeah.
Chitwell Ejiofor? I don't know.
Ejiofor?
Another Marvel person. Sean Bean, who, spoiler, does not die. Doesn't get fired, though, but, you know.
He does get fired.
So his career died, but, you know. Yeah.
We'll take it.
Benedict Wong and Donald Glover. Again, Benedict Wong, Donald Glover, Sebastian Stan, Michael Pena, all Marvel people. And Chitwell, Marvel. Kate Mara is also Marvel. She was the Invisible Woman from the Fan Four Stick.
The Fan
Four Stick film. So a lot of Marvel people.
Yeah, and this was 2015 when a lot of them were kind of rising stars at that point.
Yeah.
And this movie, the plot of this movie, it's not just Matt Damon, even though he is the only Martian at that point. It's based on a book by Andy Weir, and I think that Andy Weir deserves some credit because the cleverness in this movie, a lot of these things are clearly from the book. Mm-hmm. But the way the story goes, we see that during a mission to Mars, astronaut Mark Watney is presumed dead after a fierce storm and is left behind by his crew. But Watney has survived, finds himself stranded alone on the planet, and with only meager supplies, he must draw upon his ingenuity, wit, to find a way to contact Earth and survive long enough for a rescue. Meanwhile, millions of miles away, NASA and a team of international scientists work tirelessly to bring the Martian home. Meanwhile, his crew is coming back thinking that he died, but they plot a daring, if not impossible, rescue mission, disobeying orders to slingshot around Earth to come back and save him. As these stories of incredible bravery unfold, the world comes together to root for Watney's safe return, and you will come together to root for Watney's safe return.
Absolutely. So, Miles, we're going to go ahead and do some of our spoiler-free popcorn thoughts, popcorn ratings, and we'll try to keep this under 500 souls.
Yeah. Yeah, with Eric and I, it might take a little while.
Yeah. So I'm going to do, for me, it was buttered and salted. It actually made me care. Like, I knew from the get-go that he was going to make it, but I was still on the edge of my seat, and I wanted to cheer when everyone else cheered in this film.
Yeah, this one is buttered and salted for me. Special place in my heart. I started dating my wife a few months after Popcorn Theology started. This was a year that really mattered to me. It was one of my first dates with my wife, and I'm glad we chose this movie. It's in terms of buttered and salted, one of the reasons why a movie is buttered and salted is if it's rewatchable, like popcorn that you keep wanting to refill, and it's really rewatchable. And for me, there's just no obvious flaws. It's emotionally gripping. It reminds us of our humanity. Mark Watney, played by Matt Damon, is charming. And you really needed the type of person who's interesting enough and enough of a character to where it makes sense that they're talking to themselves, talking to the camera. And he really nailed that. And then the movie just in the end is triumphant.
Yes.
It makes me kind of believe like I could survive in extreme circumstances. It makes me believe that we could come together.
Yeah. It's very
work through
aspirational. Very aspirational. Yeah.
And it's just
back in the 2015 before the dark times.
before the following year when a man has descended down an escalator and the world lost its collective minds, and no movie could shy away from the themes that he brought in. It was a purer time.
Yeah,
that's why we've gone back to 2015 to mine the depths of the year that Popcorn Theology started. And this was actually the movie that first came to my mind when we were thinking about diving back into movies from 2015. The Martian is a gem that we missed, but I've just always really liked. It's just a good flick.
Well, hopefully we'll be covering more of them as we go along. We're planning on having this be a reoccurring theme. Going back and covering some of the films from the good films from 2015. So moving on to the spoiler-free theology side, Miles, how are you going to rate this?
So this was carbonated. For me, what's interesting, considering he's alone on a planet and it's filled with a bunch of scientists, kind of naturalists. Surprisingly, there were more than a few mentions of God. Mm-hmm. And there's underlying topics of, what can man do in the face of survival? What do we do when we face death? Man's ability to save himself or not. And there's lots, I think, in particular, of jumping off points. Although it is difficult to identify themes that run through it, there are just plenty of what we would call our lightning round topics that you could just bounce off of. Not too many themes that run straight through it, but enough to still say it's carbonated for me. What about you, Eric?
Yeah, no, I'm going with carbonated. For me, I really picked up on two major themes. One is what is the individual human life worth? And we'll be talking about that. And then the unconquerable human spirit. That spark. I don't like using words like this, but realistically, that spark of divinity inside of us that makes us not quit, makes us be incredibly creative.
Oh, there's just
we are creators. We are meant to be creators, and just the way that the human mind can problem solve stuff.
You're getting at it. He's very, very human in this movie.
Yeah.
So he's been stabbed, almost killed, and he says, "I'm not going to die here." Nope. And then what does he do? He heals and he cultivates, he makes fruitful, and he multiplies potatoes, and he chooses to stay alive. And you're like, yeah, there's something in it that's it's fun to watch. It's interesting. It's a good movie.
Yep, very, very aspirational indeed. All right, so we're going to go ahead and drop the spoiler warning, and we'll dig deeper into The Martian. Yep. And there it is. It's time for our popcorn thoughts. Miles, you thought it was buttered and salted. Why is that? What were some things you liked, didn't like? A couple standout moments, or just some thoughts.
So overall, why it's buttered and salted. Again, rewatchable. This was my third or fourth viewing, and I even went back and watched a few scenes. It is funny. I knew the plot points of this movie. It's very memorable, but you still find yourself rooting for him. You're still a little bit nervous when he's taken off the heat shield on the top of that rocket and being the fastest man in space travel. This movie, it's
scientists don't use the words fastest.
Yeah, that's not what you use. They're doing that just to convince me because they know I like the way that sounds. I do like the way it sounds. I like it a lot. He's so likable, and like the silly little jokes about being a space pirate and all these technicalities. Nerds using technicalities to be able to come to the punchline. I, Mark Watney, space pirate. Yeah. But diving into it as a popcorn flick, it has a lot of the things I love about other good movies. Castaway. It's got elements of Castaway, Apollo 13, and just any of those kind of man versus wild survival shows. It scratches all of those itches for me. I'd even just forgotten how much I liked this movie. Then on the rewatch, I just found myself going, this is just a good time for me. And you already brought up good problem solving. And it's really good storytelling in the way that it will outline a problem in a way that even a layman can understand, and then have clever ways of solving that problem, as well as trial and error, like any of us trying to solve. And so, like for example, when he starts, he goes, okay, I'm in the HAB, and the HAB was designed for a 30-day mission, and I need to survive 4 years until the next reasonable mission comes back. If the oxygenator breaks, I suffocate. If the water reclaimer breaks, I die of thirst. If the hull breaks, I implode. And if the food runs out, I starve. And you're like, boom, 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 boom. There's all these man versus nature story threats all lined up. And then you just see these fun, unique ways that he's solving these problems. Like what I like to call the Watney botany when he's making the potatoes.
Yep.
It's great. And then he's humorous all throughout it. And also, on this watching, the movie is immersive. You know that there are special effects all over the place, but it's just not obvious. I mean, there's no point in which if you're not having the critical eye that it really takes you out. And the effects are great. It looks great. I mean, you're just believable, immersive, and fun. And so I'm gushing over this movie. Now it's your turn to gush. Go for it.
Yeah.
Eric.
So this was my first time seeing it.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So it was fun. Believe it or not, I actually had to look this up. This was Ridley Scott's last commercially successful film, and also his last critically successful one as well. And you can tell. Just go on IMDb and look it up and see the box office from every film after this. This is the last one that was actually financially successful, and the last one that has basically critical and viewer praise across the board. And it's good. It is really good. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. Fill in that gap. It's a lot of fun. I laughed a lot more than I thought I would. I assumed, in all honesty, I don't know why. I was assuming like Ryan Reynolds level of humor, like where it's like, oh, it's kind of funny, but it grates on you after a while. But no, it was not that type of humor. It was really, really good. It wasn't like subversive or whatever. This film actually reminded me why Matt Damon is a good actor. Yeah, he really grabbed you, got you in. While he's talking to you directly a lot of the time, he's like his just looks and his emotions on his face and everything is just superbly acted. The rest of the cast, I mean, it was an incredibly stacked cast. We went through the list. No character really even got lost in the shuffle. Like even the Donald Glover character is really just a little bit character that just pops up to say a couple lines. Hey, I did the math. But I did the math and we can do it.
He's a tremendously talented, charismatic guy, and he plays this nerd. Even down to the little like he doesn't know who his bosses are, but he's such a genius. So there's telling story, and then he gets the ship in the stapler and to a bunch of brilliant people. It's just great scene.
Yeah, I mean he was doing that in front of Glorfindel, which is just insane.
The Council of Elrond, and then Kristen Wiig playing the straight man in a scene. She did a really good job, and it was so interesting to see her not be silly.
It almost makes me want to tell her, don't do comedy anymore. Stick to drama. Stick to drama, Kristen. But Sean Bean, that was a pleasant surprise. Especially as he doesn't show up till like midway through the second act. And I was doing a couple of double takes. Honestly, I was like, wait, is that Sean Bean? Like, guys, because this cast was so stacked with so many people, they didn't end up even wasting a character like Sean Bean's character. It was Henderson, I think his name is. It was great. And then obviously, like I said, the Council of Elrond scene. It made me laugh out loud, especially when Jeff Daniels' character goes, "I want my code name to be Glorfindel." I was like, because you have to have read the books to get that joke. Like that's a true Lord of the Rings inside baseball jokes. I thoroughly appreciated that one.
This is popcorn theology, and it shows you the power of story.
Yes,
that even people in NASA are using the stories that they love in order to try to understand the world that they're in.
Yep.
And of course, Lord of the Rings has such strong biblical undertones that makes me appreciate it a little bit more. And so, it's a secret meeting to destroy the ring or bring Watney back.
No, the film, it had a ton of suspense as well. It's like it actually made you care about Watney and root for him. Like I said in the beginning, like you knew he was going to get rescued. Like generally, like if you go and see a movie like this, unless it's from a really niche director, you basically know it's going to have somewhat of a happy ending. Like maybe someone will die, maybe something will happen, but it's gonna work. It's gonna work out in the end. And so the skill of a good director is to actually make you care when you know what's going to happen at the end. It's the journey along the way that builds that suspense of like, how is this going to happen? So like I knew he was going to make it, but I still wanted to cheer when he got rescued. I was like almost
story,
inside me wanting to cheer. If my son, he's only 2, if he had been there, he would have cheered. Like that's one of his favorite things. Anytime things on TV, he's like, "Yeah, woo, woo!"
Yeah.
And he actually goes, "Woo, woo!" We were watching hockey the other day, and someone scored, and he didn't even know. He was just walking through. He heard the crowd cheering, and he started clapping and wooing and stuff like that. So I'm
my boy watched the Three Musketeers last
man.
night and was going, "Yeah!" He's 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good story will just grip you, and this one, it does.
Yep. But one of the standout moments for me that really, obviously it's beginning of the 3rd act, so it changes the entire film. Like because the 2nd act ends almost hopefully. Like everyone that do the math and is going like, hey, he kind of solved this food problem and he's kind of got all this. Like, yeah, it's going to be a tight margin. I don't like the margin, but we're kind of going to be able to do it. It's almost like in this holding pattern.
Yeah.
And then the crops get destroyed.
Yeah.
And that moment, it changes the entire timeline for the rescue. It's what finally makes it where it's like, where the guy does the math. And it's like, it's going to be faster to just have the original crew do it. And it's the catalyst that gets him reunited with his original crew. And so, I think
the things that go wrong that break his spirit throughout this is great.
Yep.
When the resupply is destroyed on launch, and they go, oh, they were cutting corners in order to try to make the time, and we thought it was an acceptable risk, and it didn't pan out, and just so deflating. And when he's throwing out the drooping dead crops, it's like so sad. Yeah,
it's like he's taping back up the taping everything back up when he's all at the end, when he's all emaciated and super skinny.
Oh man, you know what I liked is when he taped up the broken airlock.
Yeah.
And that next night there is a storm. Yeah. And the airlock is going in and out, and you see him afraid each time it folds in or out, and you just see him. He's alone. He's afraid. He's sad because of the big disappointment. Like that was an effective scene for me.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm looking forward to getting into the theology part of this. So, before we get into the movie, and we will keep this under 500 souls, I promise.
Yeah, but just remember, a Martian soul is 40 minutes longer than an Earth soul. Yeah. I had to look that up because how long was he up there? Yeah. So slightly longer.
Yeah, we want to encourage you to like and share and rate this episode. Keep the conversation going. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and put a comment there. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow us on all of the socials. I'd love to get some more people in the Discord server. We have a free Discord server for our Patron Saints. You have your exclusive channel in the Discord server, and you also have the exclusive Facebook group. But love all newcomers, and definitely go out and support us financially on Patreon. We love for you guys to be able to do this, and the Premium City members get free in the lobby episodes, which some really cool interviews that we do with a lot of really interesting people.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, let's go ahead and hear a word from our sponsors.
Up in the sky, look! It's a bird! It's a plane!
Cinemagogue, The Marvelous Era. James Harleman here, the cinema guy, announcing the sequel to my first book on film and faith. Let's face it, entertainment has changed dramatically since the first book published in 2012, and comic book characters and franchises are everywhere. So I decided to set my sights on superheroes and examine the evolution of Hollywood in this follow-up to the first Cinemagogue book. For example, what does Loki tell us about culture's view of God? Why does the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Infinity Saga continually align with biblical themes? In the Marvelous Era, I review each film and show not only how the individual movies express gospel parallels, but each phase essentially reveals a multi-point sermon. I also explore DC, Star Wars, the Monsterverse, and more. Without compromising scriptural truth, we can sift these stories and discover how we might reject, receive, and redeem ideas for personal reflection and Christian conversation. Also, has Hollywood's messaging gotten worse? The book explores ways these marvelous mythologies correspond with conversion, Christian living, church history, and Reformation, but I do also highlight what has been the entertainment industry's darker, indoctrinating decade, as well as toxic fandom and the dangers of immersion in pop culture that just might drown us spiritually if we're not careful. So suit up, assemble, and join me on a journey to the Infinity Saga and beyond. Cinemagogue, The Marvelous Era. Now available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle editions. Hey, this is James, and if you're listening to Popcorn Theology, it's because you're interested in movies, or theology, or best of all, both. And that probably means you're our kind of people, sharing things in common with our community, and maybe sharing common interests our listeners and viewers would be interested in as well. So why not partner with us and advertise your business or ministry right here on Popcorn Theology? We're looking for great, like-minded sponsors and offer reasonable rates with a variety of formats to get your message out. Remember, our fans aren't mindless consumers, so they'll give you thoughtful consideration. That's a big part of what we're all about. So for more information on advertising with us, contact info@popcorntheology.com.
And we're back. That means it's time to pour and sample the more spiritual aspects of this film and its narrative. So let's shift gears and discuss the themes of The Martian. So Miles, on the beginning side, and I think I agree with you, is you said it wasn't really that easy to find like a core theological theme, right?
Yeah, it was typically you can trace a theme that kind of runs through a movie, through conflicts of multiple characters and things. But I found it just pretty difficult to think of a streamlined way of talking about this movie. But there's just plenty of things to say. I think probably a bunch of fodder for lightning round kind of ideas, but like one idea, I didn't even know how to turn it into a grand like narrative theme. Just I thought probably the core idea of the movie they're trying to get across is encapsulated in that final speech that Watney gives. You were talking about the human spirit, and you have older Watney giving his wisdom to the new astronauts, and he says this. He says, at some point everything's going to go south, and you're going to say, "This is it. This is how I end." Now, you can either accept that or you can get to work. That's all it is. You just begin. You do the math. You solve one problem, and you solve the next one, and then the next. And if you solve enough problems, you get to come home. So I was wrestling with that theme a little bit. You go, well, theologically, we're helpless. We cannot save ourselves. And so I was going, should I push back on this idea? Should I hold on to it? Because his determination to live, his basic hope for the future. Christians live with hope. And so this concept of, I'm not going to die here. There is a way through this problem. That's something worth commending. And so I didn't even know what direction to take it, but it is an interesting point. And it's a good piece of advice. I was talking to somebody at church the other day. He said, I hold on to that concept of just do the next right thing.
Yeah.
And my Christian life radically changed when I was a young man trying to figure out, who do I marry? What job should I take? And what is God's call on my life? And I read a book that just talked about the greatest commandment: love God and love others. And he simplified it in such a way of just, what if you just decided to love God and love others with the next decision, with the next hour, with the next day? And it really changed. It got me out of like a hole of depression. Of just, this is what the Christian life is about.
Yeah.
Wherever you are, love God and love others with your next decision, and you are walking in step with God's purpose for you right now. And then if you do that 1,000 times, all of a sudden your life takes the direction that looks like, God could have dropped out what job, what person to marry, where to go, because you've been walking in step with him one at a time. And so I can kind of relate to the quote, but like a secular humanist might take that quote and say, yeah, this is a movie about how science and human ingenuity can save you.
Yeah.
Right? So you could say this movie is pointing for an atheistic, scientistic view. Look, with charm and wit, human ingenuity, and the herd instinct where we all come together to save the straying person, we can achieve anything. And so as a Christian, I'd go, well, that's kind of the spirit of the Tower of Babel. And that's a negative thing. But in The Martian, you actually get a little respect for God. Did you notice that even though you got scientists, kind of naturalists, a botanist, biologist, they actually mentioned God quite a few times in this movie?
Yeah.
Like I identified three times where they mentioned God in an interesting way. So he needs to start a fire in order to burn the hydrogen, combine it with oxygen, and create water for his plants. And he says, well, flames kill people in space. So the only thing flammable in here is Martinez's personal item. And what is it? A wooden cross.
Yep.
It's great. And then, because Mark Watney is who he is, he's shaving off pieces of the cross. And he says to Jesus, by the way, I figured you'd be fine with this given my present situation.
Yeah.
And then he says to Jesus, counting on you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
It might just, it's mostly just kind of a joke, but I'm like, you don't know how true that is, Mark Watney. Counting on Jesus. And then the big emotional moment you talked about when the crops blow up, after he is putting away the garbage and taping up everything, he goes into the MAV, I think. No, what is it? The rover.
Yeah.
And he just yells God a bunch as he's punching the roof.
Yeah.
God, 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 God. Which, we don't really like the blasphemy, but in a heated moment, he's actually talking about God.
Yeah.
And then...
Well, it's the old saying of there's no atheists in foxholes. It's because
that comes up.
Because they're praying. There's also no atheists in a crisis because everyone's angry and shouting at God in a crisis as well.
Yeah.
And so it's both sides. Whereas like in the foxhole, you're praying to God that you live through this thing, but in the moments of crisis and your crops have been blown up or something tragic happens to one of your children or something, you have that anger towards God, and it refocuses everything in life in those crisis situations. And then
you have a lot of these scientists who, like, at a certain point they go, okay, I've created the best plan I could, but I don't know if it's going to work, and I might need some help. So you have another great Sean Bean moment at the end of the movie. Sean Bean's character Mitch asks Vincent, I think, he says, do you believe in God, Vincent? And this is right before Mark is going to launch with the MAV, which he's dropped, 2,000 kilograms off of it or something like that.
Yeah.
Become the fastest man in the history of space travel. To reunite with the Ares crew. And Vincent says, yeah, my father was a Hindu and my mother a Baptist. So yeah, I believe in several gods. And Mitch goes, well, we'll take all the help we can get. Yep. And so, again, popcorn theology. On one side, I reject that point. Well, there's a plurality of gods.
Yep.
We are exclusively Christians, exclusively Jesus. Jesus is the only name under heaven by which men might be saved. Acts 4:12. He is the God of gods. But on the positive side, at least you have some of these scientist types understanding they have a need for help. Just that little slice. So you go, okay. And in a movie that could have really taken a jab at religious types, there was a lot of that kind of connection to every man's perspective of, when things are really going poorly, and even if you've laid your best plans, there's ultimately a prayer to be said of, Lord, I know that other things need to happen in order for this plan to work. Please bend them in our favor.
Yep. No, I definitely agree. It's interesting because I think this film, it never answers the question, honestly, and it's one of my questions, and I think your point will actually flow into mine fairly well. But really, the question of why are we going through such extreme lengths to save one person, to bring him home? Why is that? Because again, an atheistic, materialistic, or even scientific worldview and bent, we're just atoms smashing around. Someone dying on Mars, someone dying on Earth, someone dying in between. It's all of the same value, and so it's just kind of this interesting thing. So I'll let you kind of go into your points talking about the bringing him home, because I think only in the film doesn't actually address it, the philosophy behind why.
Yeah.
Why would you expend so much time and energy? But I think you find it in the Christian worldview, and particularly in the person of Christ.
Yeah, the movie shows a really good description of how people will sacrifice tremendously in order to bring the lost home, but it doesn't quite answer the why. It almost just marvels at how human beings do that.
Yeah,
leaves perhaps a God-shaped hole in there. So yeah, you're right. My main point was here is just look at this story about, the posters have Mark Watney's face and three words: bring him home. And that's a story about seeking the lost, which starts to drift into what I would say is arguably Jesus' most popular parable, is the parable of the prodigal son, which that's in Luke 15. And Luke 15 is actually, the whole chapter is 3 parables that all hit the same point. You have the first parable of the lost sheep and the shepherd that goes after him. Then you have the lost coin and the woman that goes after that and finds it. And then you have the lost son, which is the prodigal son, which you might be able to call the lost sons, because relationally the older brother is lost. And so all of this is set up. I'll read the first, beginning in verse 2 of chapter 15. The setting is this. It says, "And the Pharisees and scribes grumbled, saying, 'This man receives sinners and eats with them.' Then Jesus, it says, 'So he told them this parable. What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying, Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost. Just so, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance.'" So that story, the theme that runs through these is a lost thing being found, which represents sinners coming to Christ, and the joy experienced by those who have found the lost sheep, coin, and the son. It talks about the price worth paying to bring him home.
Yeah.
The shepherd was willing to leave the 99, the woman was willing to turn her house over, and the father was willing to embarrass himself to have his son come back. And so you see in The Martian, there's a huge risk, great expense to bring Mark Watney back, and tremendous joy around the world, even among enemies. And so as a Christian, I read that and I go, well, you could almost add that to the end of Luke chapter 15, the parable of the lost astronaut. And then the Christian application is this, is you were a sinner, and God went through incredibly painful efforts in order to give you the opportunity to come home. Will you receive it, and will you understand the joy at being brought back home? And so it's like this parable of what was lost being found and the joy that we experience when they're back. So it's a really cool picture. I'm not sure what the movie is trying to communicate there, but as a Christian, it's like lights this spotlight right on Luke 15 for me.
Yeah. No, as you read it and finished it up, I literally was like, wow. It's like that cheering, that the rejoice with me, for I found the sheep that was lost. And so I tell you, there is more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. And it's like I had the Times Square scene in
Yes.
my head as you said that, of like, yeah, we got him, yeah. I was
Yeah.
like, yeah,
And it's,
I had
it's
that,
like Jesus
yeah.
pointing out, which of you, if you lost an astronaut, would not reroute a mission and beg the Chinese to help you and call the world to pray and have the JPS rocketry firm working sleepless nights over and over and over again to bring him home? That's the way God pursues sinners. And that's his excitement over that person that you despise who comes to Christ. That's the way God feels. And so you were like, you know how you like The Martian? It's almost like if Jesus was in modern day. You know how you like The Martian?
Yeah.
That's the way God feels about sinners who repent. And you go, yeah, that'll preach.
Yeah.
And then just like, I know that you're already going to kind of talk about, but that does raise questions about the cost that people pay. And so similar to my point in terms of what the shepherd goes through in order to pursue the sheep. I liked how the crew that was floating in space,
Yep.
they're willing to ignore their protocols, ignore their orders, ignore the institution that put them in space that they spent their whole life to become a part of in order to go back and get Mark. They ignore their orders. They use tools for their unintended purposes, blowing up half of their ship, which means it was an uncomfortable ride home.
Yep.
The gym and all that area. And, Watney is removing parts from the MAV and destroying things in order to get back. And all of this reminds me of Jesus healing on the Sabbath.
Mm.
This is actually the previous chapter in Luke 14. Jesus says to them, "Which of you, having a son or an ox that has fallen into a well on a Sabbath day, will not immediately pull him out?" And they could not reply to these things. So you see people aghast. Why would they disobey orders? And they go, "Look, this is a man who's part of our crew, and he was lost." They talk about 533 more days in space,
Yeah.
and they go, "Let's do it like immediately." And you're like, the heart of the law is they're living by. Like, yeah, we love NASA, we love our country, we've obeyed our orders, but what was all this for? Is the triumph of humanity, and bringing Mark back is what we're trying to achieve. So they're even willing to pay a great cost to bring him back. It's just such a cool thing. They're so loyal. I want to have that kind of character. They're so
Yes.
loyal and sacrificial. Like the scene when they're flying by Earth so they can video call for a few days.
Yeah.
And there's kids, like toddlers, who are going to miss their mother and father for another year and a half.
Yep.
Ooh, what a sacrifice in order to bring him home. What a great cost. And it's like, I hope to be that kind of person when there's hard choices to be made. Will I be
Yeah.
that kind of person? It's like, let's watch some more stories that help me try to be that kind of person.
Yep. And so that does get into that question, though, is you always have to do this as the banker and stuff like that. I think about this stuff.
Yeah.
And as a fiscally conservative person, I think about a lot of stuff. Is what is one life worth? And so like billions of dollars to save one
Billions.
man. Billions of dollars to save one man. And then if you want to go the Judas route of, but they're starving people here on Earth. It's like, why? Yeah, it's like they're starving people here on Earth. What are we doing? If we can afford billions of dollars to rescue one man from Mars, then how come we don't have universal health care? How come we don't have universal food?
Yeah.
How come we don't have... You start to ask these questions of, like, what's if one human life is worth billions when they're stranded on Mars, how come one human life isn't worth billions here? And
Yeah.
you do... and there's no simple answer. There's no real answer. I think the answer is actually within Christ. I mean, he does rebuke Judas in that situation. He goes, the poor are always with you for you to do good to. I was like, they're always here for you. But there's a special occasion right this moment, Judas. So again, Jesus talking about himself being anointed by the oil,
The woman,
the perfume, the really expensive perfume that could have it was like 100 denarii or whatever it was. It's like a year's worth. It's basically like a year's salary type thing. And Judas is going, ugh, this should have been sold and given to the poor. And Jesus is going, dude, you can help the poor whenever you want, but you've only got me for a little bit of time. And it's a similar type of situation with this, where it's like, you're right, we probably should do something better for that, but we put a guy up there, and we're gonna get him back. We're not going to let him just die just because budgetary constraints now.
Just to save the money.
Put him there.
And ultimately, it seems to be that God says, there is enough money out there to take care of people. I have provided for you. You're just a little bit frustrated about what's being moved around right in front of me, Judas.
Yes.
But we have to trust that he is the multiplier of loaves and fishes and the owner of the cattle on 1,000 hills.
Yep. And so that's the economic side of what is one life worth. The other side is, I think the quote was, high chance of killing one or low chance of killing 5.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was.
I had a lot of sympathy for Jeff Daniels' character.
Yeah, I did too.
He was actually kind of the dad in the room, even though he was positioned on the wrong side of a lot of these discussions. He was trying to do what was best for NASA.
Yeah.
Which is a noble goal.
Yeah.
But
what was the thing he said? Is like every time we fail at something, we lose credibility, we lose popularity, we lose funding, and we can't do what we need to do anymore every time that we fail. And so he's looking at this going, I do not want him to die. I want him to live. I want to figure something out. But I'm not going to risk the life of 5 more people who are on their way home, who are already on their way home. And because he won't make that decision, he gets called a coward. And it was just kind of this interesting thing. Is like, was that the right word? Because he wouldn't make that decision? It's like, no, he was thinking, it's the whole idea of what's the individual versus the collective, right?
Yep.
That constant tension there. And in one way, he's valuing the collective more than the individual, because he's looking at NASA collectively. And Henderson, Sean Bean's character, is like, his whole thing is like, tell the crew and let them decide. And Sanders wouldn't do that because he was thinking of the collective. At the end of the day, it's like, not that you always want to quote him, but he said it was a true prophecy. When Caiaphas, the high priest, talking about Jesus, he said, better to let one man die than the whole nation. And Sanders is kind of taking that serpent type of wisdom of going like, hey, I've done the cold hard math here, and it would be better for Watney to die than the entire crew. And so let's go ahead and have the crew do it. Now it all gets subverted. It gets subverted. He's not able to go his way. Like I said, and Sean Bean's
and he goes with
career gets killed.
Career gets killed. Sean Bean dies. NASA Sean Bean dies in order that, what was he, like a coach at the end in the epilogue? I forget.
He golf coach or something. I don't know what he was doing.
But he was, he sends that secret message and everything. Yeah, so Sean Bean does die.
Yeah. But so there's kind of the interesting thing is like Caiaphas says better to let one man die than the whole nation. Jesus says there's no greater love than this, that a man should lay his life down for his friends. And that's where you were talking about that loyalty of his crew. The second that his crew finds out that he's alive and that there's an opportunity for them to save him, they're all on board. They're all willing to lose their lives to save his. And it's this interesting thing, like, you can have one man who's thinking of the collective, right? But then you have this collective who's thinking about the one man. And it's just this repositioning of everything where when we're focused on Christ and his sacrifice, it ends up not being... So I had the Captain America quote from Infinity War, where he's talking about, it's like, we don't trade lives. And one of in the notes, and Miles, I'll steal it from you, but it's attributed to Miles. He says, the rule seems to be we don't trade other people's lives but people can sacrifice themselves. And I think that's the main big difference is Caiaphas is trading Jesus' life for the nation, whereas Jesus is saying, no, it's better that me lay down my life for you, for the collective. And same way that Watney's crew is willing to lay their life down for the individual.
And I like that that the commander, she's not willing to do this. So they have this meeting, and they say, well, you're the boss. And she says, no, this has to be unanimous. So she's not willing to lay down their life in order to try to fix her, guilt and mistakes. She says, 533 more days in space, court-martial for any of the military, and you guys will probably never be able to fly again.
Yeah.
They're laying down their NASA lives, too. They're, like Sean Bean's character, their NASA lives will die, laying down their life for Mark, too. And she's not willing to trade their lives, but we do commend them for laying down their own lives. And that seems to be the logic that most of our movies, popular movies, will portray. I'm not willing to use you as a tool to achieve my good ends, to think of you as expendable, but I will lay down my life. I mean, it really is philosophically, there's two main schools of ethics. There's deontological ethics, which is duty-based ethics, and there's utilitarian ethics, which is greatest amount of happiness or utility for the greatest number of people. And those, in different circumstances, they really do seem right to most people. But in a lot of these movies, you have these decision points where you're trying to figure out who is right, and the director of NASA has to be kind of utilitarian because he has to think in terms of large groups. But the individuals, say, no, it is about this man. It is about our loyalty. It's about our duty. And it's amazing how they run into each other and create these moral dilemmas. And they're peppered all throughout this movie. Even the Chinese have to wrestle with this.
Yeah.
They could stay quiet about their jet propulsion technology. They could stay quiet and not risk failure on the world stage, or they could offer their rockets, offer their boosters to the Americans, and they do. And everything inside you goes, yeah, good job, China. The world has come together. World peace has been achieved by people coming together to save Mark. And what is the cost worth, and how do we weigh these decisions? So it's good storytelling that, like we were saying, makes these jumping off points of what is a person worth. And how commendable is it when somebody lays down their lives for their friends?
Yep.
And all of those crew were willing to do that. And it's just, I was like, that's good storytelling. Good movie, buttered and salted.
Yep, absolutely.
Tasty
so
drink.
Let's go ahead and move into our lightning round.
Now, was there lightning on Mars in any of those scenes? There were those little dust devils that were ominous.
I feel like there was some lightning, but I don't know if there should be lightning. I don't know enough about the atmosphere of Mars because
I've
it
heard
seemed
some
like
people
there were
say
a couple times in the background where it was flashing, at night, and so I don't know if although the flashing at night could have been his
the strobe.
Yeah,
the strobe that
maybe
was
that's
going.
what I was seeing.
Yeah, and I have seen some scientific people so David is our most educated, the only doctor on the podcast, and he was saying that among scientists this is known as one of the better scientific movies. But I've seen some people criticize and say, the atmosphere is so thin on Mars that you probably wouldn't have had the danger of tilting over that ship. The whole premise of the first act. And we say, be quiet. We need that plot point to make
shut
a
up,
good
Neil.
movie.
Because I'm sure Neil has some opinions on that.
But in terms of receive, reject, and redeem, I didn't have any particular rejects besides the religious pluralism of the guy who says I believe in many gods in that nice moment. But so reject the religious pluralism. But beside that, I didn't have any themes from the movie that seemed worth rejecting.
Yeah, no, I didn't have any that were reject. That were direct rejects and stuff. Yeah. So we'll go ahead and move on to some redeems then. So a redeem for me was it kind of is thinking that grand gestures to show how much you value human life is enough. And so it's like Christ incarnated into the world and he lived as one of us, and that would have been enough for any earthly king. Matter of fact, there's a lot of stories or parables of kings that go undercover and live as a common man and stuff, and they learn their lesson. It's like, but no, that wasn't enough for Christ. Like Christ, in Westminster Shorter Catechism, question 27, it talks about what consists of Christ's humiliation. It's longer than what I share here, but it starts with Christ's humiliation consisted in his being born, and you could end it there. Like that's enough humiliation for the King of the universe to be born human, and that in a low condition, and then it goes on to the other things. But Christ, he also died for us and rose for us, and that's beyond like just a mere grand gesture of expensing billions of dollars to show how much we care about one individual and bringing them back to Mars, and then going the next day and allowing people to starve on the streets. No, it's like, no, Christ actually came and he fixed that problem. Or, he fixed it in a way that we now know is wrong to do that, because this is the other thing people don't realize. The ethical mindset has shifted completely, where in the Greco-Roman world and in multiple other countries throughout the world, if you were poor, that was the gods punishing you. Christ,
well, and there are worldviews that say if you're poor and you're suffering, in fact, this is good because you're dealing with your previous life's sins, effectively. Yeah, and it's not only it's unfortunate you're being punished. This is actually a good thing because you're being. Yep. But the Judeo-Christian worldview seems to have won the conversation across the world in this way.
Yeah, and so by Christ's incarnation, living among us, dying and rising for us, it goes beyond just a mere grand gesture, a one-time thing. It's an active thing that's being worked out in the world, and that's the true level of caring about human life beyond the crisis moments. Because it's easy to care about human lives when there's a big crisis. But when you have to live with us for 30 years and then choose to die for us, that's a different level of love and care for humans.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's many of those redeem points in here and receive points. Like, another one is it's really nice to see by the end of the movie. We talked about this a little bit. The world unity around saving a fellow man, the fellowship of humanity, like capital H humanity. You have China, different teams, different nations. The funding gets pulled together, teams of people all working together in order to bring this one man back, and there's unity there. They even use that name, the Council of Elrond. That's where the Fellowship of the Ring, enemies brought together to destroy the ring. That concept and how that is being lived out in this world in order to save Mark. And I just think, we could redeem that point in the sense of when you understand the gospel, that God has come back to reclaim the nations from sin, darkness, death, and the devil. That is something that should unite us. No slave nor Greek, male or female, Jew or Greek. All of these things fall underneath the identity of Christian and redeemed in Christ. So that's a cool picture that we can redeem there, where we see people united for a grander purpose. And then another redeem point is just, it was cool to see Mark go through all of these things that are deeply human. The creation mandate, things like Adam and Eve, Genesis 1 and 2. One of my favorite scenes this time was watching the security cam footage of his water. Just turned the dust into mud. And it reminded me of Genesis 2, where it says, no bush of the field had been grown, but the Lord God had not caused it to rain, but mist went up from the land and was watering the whole face of the ground. Very cool picture of that little security cam footage. And then it says, then the Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Man became a living creature to live in that environment. So you see, this land, inside this this land is becoming habitable. It's a Genesis picture. And you see, the previous chapter, Genesis 1, God blessed humanity and said, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Watney was having dominion over little pieces of Mars and making it habitable. There's even little instances of, well, this certainly seems like cursed ground. Honestly, that's one way of thinking of Genesis, is that you can look at the land. It was formless and void. It was like Mars, and God makes it habitable and then puts people there to care for it. And then, because of sin, the ground is cursed and it becomes Mars-like. And you go, it's just fun watching him survive and thrive and be fruitful and at least multiply potatoes. Watney botany.
Yes, absolutely. A receive that I had was not giving up in the face of impossible odds, doing whatever it takes to save one life, even if it costs five more to do it. It's like that. That is a receive. I want to be clear on that. Whereas like that choice to go, those 5 people of going, no, we're all going to come together to save it. It reminds me of one of my favorite movies of all time is Black Hawk Down, where the movie goes to use it goes tits up.
South. Go south.
It's
in the words of Watney.
Yeah, and so it goes south, and yet these men are willing to go above and beyond to just save their brothers, even when they know they're going to die. Jamie Lannister is actually in that film, one of his early films. He's part of one of the favorite, most emotional scenes is where him and another Delta Force sniper get permission to have to land and protect the wreckage, knowing that they're going to die. And it's like that's a level beyond what we normally think of, and it fits in very well with this. Is like they're doing whatever it takes to save one life of their buddies down there, to defend them, even if it's going to cost them their lives. Yep.
And I think one last really fun picture there is the captain's repentance. I mean, so she at the beginning of the movie, she's a good commander, but she has to have a disagreement with Watney. Watney wants to stay, she wants to go. They start to go, and on their way out, that's when Watney gets hit by the communications antenna and his bioscanner gets ripped out. Yep. She tries to find him, but she can't. And then it's that weight of guilt on her, and she does, like, I don't think it's not clearly an intentional moral sin, but she did sin in terms of erring, missing the mark in terms of being a perfect commander, and she repents. I mean, literally, repentance means change of mind or turn around. Literally goes back for him to get him, and it's great, and her silly music gave him something to rail against.
Yeah,
and she sacrifices an extra 533 days of her life in order to make right her honest mistake, but still her mistake nonetheless. Yep. And she's a real heroic character, and it's just, man.
And this is kind of one of those interesting things. It's one of my points is in that situation, like how everything worked out and stuff like that. They needed to leave, or the ship would have been lost.
Yep.
Like all of them would. Yeah. Maybe they wouldn't have died. Maybe
she even told the pilot to go off. It said, if it's going to tip, you go, because it's better that at least one of us survive.
Yeah. And so it's like you had to leave. The ship had to leave. Something had to be done. But this interesting thing about this is cold logic does not help with guilt. Like, it doesn't help with guilt. And it's like you can rationalize it as much as you want, but the fact is, like, she left him. She needed to leave him. Like, she had to leave him, because she didn't. Who knows what would have happened to the rest of the crew? Because the pilot, in all reality, he was not going to leave.
No,
like, he wasn't going to leave. All of them would have been stranded on Mars for X amount of time,
and they all would have died because they would have definitely ran out of food. Yeah,
but it was this cold logic. The cold logic doesn't help with guilt, and I think that's something that Christians, a lot of times when we're trying to talk with people, and we do rationalize some of the situations in life, is going like, yeah, what we're saying is true, but it's not going to help them. And as a matter of fact, there's the saying of facts don't care about your feelings. Well, the inverse is actually true as well. Feelings don't care about your facts. And this is a situation where it doesn't matter. The fact is, you, your crew, everyone would have died if you stuck around on Mars. You made the right call by leaving.
But you still feel guilty.
But she still feels guilty about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's an interesting way how our human brains work and live and get us through the day. But the cold hard logic does not assuage guilt. Only repentance can actually accomplish that.
Amen. Amen to that.
And last is a quote I had, and also you had too, but your time truncated a little bit, is when he's talking to the captain about what to tell his parents, and he says, "Dying for something big and beautiful and greater than me, I can live with that." And if that's not the call for a Christian, like, Christ is bigger, more beautiful, and greater than me, and I'm willing to die for him, and I can live with those terms. And those terms are very much acceptable.
It's like, amen, Watney, but you don't even know what you're saying, because you're dying for adventure, the progress of science, humanity, NASA. Like, what if there's something truly eternal and meaningful worth dying? Something eternally beautiful. Something that takes all of the virtues that we extol in this movie, this adventure that you are living, Matt, Mark, and is found in the person of Christ. Something beautiful and greater than you, worth dying for you. And it's like, yeah, what if we lived in such a way in which we could accept death, even if it came at a time and place that we didn't want to? And so that's definitely a redeem. You're like, not sure if you found the right purpose, Watney, but you're on the right track.
Yep, absolutely, man, absolutely. So the credits are about to roll in this episode. So until next time, keep engaging movies and media from a godly perspective, and remember, you are not a Martian. I mean, a mindless consumer.
Thanks for watching this episode of Popcorn Theology. For more content, subscribe on YouTube. Follow and interact on social media to help broaden the conversation. Check out our archive of past episodes at popcorntheology.com or wherever you listen to podcasts, and consider becoming a patron saint by supporting us on Patreon, which lets you interact, influence, and enjoy exclusive bonus content.